Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the Earth as we come to air with edition number 1391 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The ARRL initiative to pass the Amateur Radio HOA antenna bill now before Congress continues. ARDC, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Group, is now accepting grant applications. We will have an update from the Hurricane WatchNet on Tropical Storm Melissa. The FCC takes action against foreign-owned electronic testing and certification laboratories. An amateur radio boot camp at Georgia Tech is a success and licenses 44 students. AMSAT will now offer free memberships for students. The Radio Society of Great Britain launches a mobile app. The United States Air Force 77th Annual Special Event Station is coming up soon. The CRTC, Canada's regulator, eliminates expiration dates for broadcast licenses. A new website offers personalized propagation reports for your specific area. We will tell you about it. The FCC announces its intent to delete minor Part 97 rules and regulations. And we will take a look at the question, is low Earth orbit becoming too crowded? All that and a lot more is straight ahead on this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio returns to his construction project in a segment called Bald Yak Number 13, Monitoring the Sun in Small Steps. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another encore edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to January of 1921, when the ARRL ran another round of transcontinental relays over several nights, setting new records for coast-to-coast round-trip message relaying. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, where the weather has been a little on the chilly side, this is George, W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where I think I finally got rid of that hideous hum that was in the background, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our headquarters studios here in frosty Naugatuck, Connecticut, where we had our very first frost of the season last night, I'm Steve, K1FRC.
And reporting this week from Cortlandville, New York, and my ham shack, where the cat who lets us live with him decides to always lie on top of my HF amplifier, apparently because it's warm. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
From the Churchville, New York Bureau in the Finger Lakes region, where the mornings are brisk and the apples are plentiful, this is Ron, W2ELS.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where we're getting ready for Halloween this week, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet, X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, well, there are literally hundreds of pumpkins in our farm neighbor's field, which are being patrolled by his herd of white-faced Hereford cows. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where autumn has finally made a stormy appearance, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Leading off our news this week, the ARRL's nationwide grassroots campaign aimed at securing the passage of federal legislation that would grant amateur radio operators the right to install antennas on their property has been active now for just over a month. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more from League headquarters.
The campaign, announced in the ARRL membership bulletin on September 17, 2025, follows the reintroduction of the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act in February of 2025. The bipartisan bills are designed to prevent restrictive homeowners association HOA rules that currently prohibit or severely limit the installation of amateur radio antennas, even when such antennas are hidden in trees, placed in attics, mounted on vehicles, or look like flagpoles. This legislation is about restoring equal rights to licensed amateur radio operators, said ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR. These restrictions hinder not only the enjoyment of amateur radio, but also its vital role in emergency communication during disasters. To advance the legislation, ARRL is calling on its members and all licensees of the U.S. Amateur Radio Service to take action by sending letters to their congressional representatives. That process has been made easy through a dedicated online tool that hams can use to easily generate and submit pre-drafted letters with just a few clicks. Every letter matters, and your representatives and senators need to know that the passage of this legislation is important to you. ARRL is also encouraging radio clubs to provide letters of support and is urging each club officer to sign the letters. There are instructions for clubs on how to complete the letters and a sample letter for clubs, DXOCX, that should be customized with their information. All of the information to help pass the bill can be found at arrl.org, current legislation. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
General mobile radio service users can also now send in letters. All of the information to help pass the bill can be found at arrl.org/current legislation. The bipartisan bills are H.R. 1094 in the House and S. 459 in the Senate.
As part of a much larger overhaul focused on deleting almost 400 obsolete wireless regulations, the Federal Communications Commission has announced plans to delete or modify 4 minor provisions of Part 97. The ARRL's Washington Council has reviewed the proposal and agrees that the deletions are obsolete and will have no impact on today's modern amateur radio service. One of the deletions was suggested by the ARRL as part of an earlier FCC request for public input on rules ripe for deletion. The proposed regulatory changes are: delete Part 97.27. This provision relates to the FCC's right to modify station licenses. The Commission rationale for deletion is that it duplicates Section 316 of the Communications Act. Its deletion will result in no substantive changes to the right of the FCC to modify a station license. Delete Part 97.29. This provision specified the procedure to replace paper licenses. The FCC stopped producing paper licenses at the end of 2020, having implemented a system that allows any licensee to download license originals using the password-protected area of the FCC's ULS computer database system that is web accessible. The ARRL proposed deleting this section in comments filed earlier this year. Delete Part 97.135, Subpart B, Paragraph 2. This provision grandfathered HF amplifiers purchased before April 28, 1978 by an amateur radio operator for use at the operator's station, and also grandfathered those manufactured before April 28, 1978, for which a marketing waiver was issued. The applicability of this rule has long passed. Delete Part 97.521, Subpart B, and Appendix 2. This rule and appendix related to volunteer examiner coordinators' regions, which were based on the traditional amateur radio call sign areas. The FCC no longer limits volunteer examiner coordinators to regions, and there is no reason for doing so given the nature of remote exams. Direct final rule proceedings such as this are limited to rules that are no longer applicable because they have sunset by operation of law, govern an expired event, regulate an obsolete technology, regulate virtually a null set of FCC licensees, regulate an outdated market structure or otherwise are no longer used in practice or otherwise in the public interest. The deletions will become effective 60 days after publication in the Federal Registry, unless the Commission finds that the adverse comments filed within 20 days of publication raise significant issues that merit additional consideration. The ARRL will continue to engage with the FCC in the regulatory and rulemaking process as part of its mission to promote and protect the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio and to develop the next generation of radio amateurs.
Amateur Radio Digital Communications has a mission to support the tinkerers, the dreamers, and the builders who keep ham radio strong. They recently issued a reminder that they are actively looking for applicants. Grants are available from Amateur Radio Digital Communications, which is giving top priority to projects in one of several areas, supporting satellite technology for ham analog and digital communications, developing hands-on open source and educational materials and projects for learners in schools and clubs, and delving into open source hardware and software systems that include SDRs, new modulation techniques, and codec technologies. ARDC said that projects outside these areas would also be welcome to apply, but that these areas are closest to the core of the organization's goal of promoting the freedom to tinker, build, communicate, and openly share information. Details can be found on the ARDC website.
The National Hurricane Center in Florida, the Hurricane WatchNet, and amateur radio operators have been tracking Tropical Storm Melissa. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has more in this report from League headquarters.
Melissa is definitely going to need to be watched. If it makes it into the Gulf, it could be a big problem, said ARRL Director of Emergency Management Josh Johnson, KE5MHV. As of midday Thursday, Melissa had been reorganizing and is expected to begin intensifying. Heavy rains and life-threatening flooding are expected for portions of Hispaniola and Jamaica through the weekend. A tropical storm warning is now in effect for Jamaica. Rainfall totals are forecast to be 6 to 12 inches in the southern Dominican Republic, southern Haiti, and eastern Jamaica through Sunday, with locally higher amounts possible throughout the weekend. Melissa's track and forward speed reduces confidence in the exact totals. Regardless, significant life-threatening flash flooding and numerous landslides are expected. HWN is currently at Alert 3 standby mode. When activated, amateur radio operators can monitor or join the net on 14.325 MHz upper sideband during the day or 7.268 MHz lower sideband at night. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The VOIP Hurricane Net will continue to monitor Melissa and any other developments in the tropics. This week in amateur radio will have any further updates as the storm progresses.
The FCC has continued its actions against foreign-owned laboratories that test imported electronics for sale and use in the USA. Just days before the shutdown that affected much of the U.S. government, including the FCC, the Commission announced that the 4 laboratories, like the 11 the Commission denied in early September, were controlled by Chinese interests. That makes for a total of 15 such labs rejected so far by the FCC's Office of Engineering and Technology, as part of the administration's goal to give U.S.-owned companies the responsibility of certifying electronics for import and sale in the U.S. All approved equipment must demonstrate that it is not a threat to U.S. national security and must comply with FCC standards. This move is the latest following the Commission's adoption in May of the order. At the time the order was announced, the FCC disclosed that about 75% of all electronics sold in the U.S. are being tested by Chinese labs.
The Georgia Tech Amateur Radio Club, W4AQL, hosted its largest ever amateur radio boot camp at the Hive Makerspace, welcoming more than 45 students for a full day of hands-on learning, presentations, and license testing on October 18th. With more details on the boot camp, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this report.
The boot camp introduced Georgia Tech students to the fundamentals of amateur radio through interactive sessions on electronics, antennas, digital communications, and safety practices. Participants explored how radio connects science, engineering, and community service in an accessible and exciting way. And throughout the day, attendees took part in radio-themed Kahoot trivia challenges, talked with operators from local clubs, and learned how to continue their journey in amateur radio. The club also awarded 20 portable handheld radios to newly licensed students and winners of the Kahoot trivia to help them get on the air right away. Our goal was to make radio approachable and engaging, said Club Vice President Matthew Lyon, KN4MXH. We want every student who walks in curious to leave passionate, ready to explore, and grow in this hobby. The highlight of the day was a free FCC technician license testing program coordinated by the Atlanta VE team. Thanks to their dedication and smooth coordination, 44 students earned their amateur radio licenses, achieving an impressive 98% pass rate. Founded in 1912, the Georgia Tech Amateur Radio Club is one of the oldest collegiate amateur radio organizations in the country. The club continues to promote education, experimentation, and service through campus outreach and collaboration with the Atlanta radio community. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
The success of the boot camp has set the foundation for a large-scale student training and licensing program in future semesters. W4AQL plans to continue offering hands-on learning opportunity, license upgrade sessions, and technical workshops that blend Georgia Tech's academic strengths with the practical side of amateur radio. Student-run boot camps don't just teach radio, they also build momentum for youth on the air, explained the club president, Audrey McElroy, KM4BUN. We hope that these and future attendees will become tomorrow's operators, Elmers, and net controllers.
DX Look, the real-time HF propagation and reception platform used by amateur radio operators worldwide, has introduced a new feature, personalized band conditions. This update enhances how operators understand HF propagation by tailoring band condition estimates to each user's specific grid location, rather than relying solely on global indices such as SFI, A-index, or K-index. And DX Look now provides location-aware predictions that consider geographic position, local time, and atmospheric factors. Global space weather numbers are valuable, said Rodrigo Varquez, creator of DX Look. But what matters most to operators is what's happening right now at their own QTH. Personalized band conditions bridge that gap. The new system recognizes that propagation can differ greatly between regions. For example, auroral absorption at high latitudes, heavy static noise in tropical zones, or nighttime delayer changes at mid-latitudes. By factoring in these local influences, DX Look offers more relevant, real-world guidance for operators planning contacts. The feature is now available on dxlook.com and integrates seamlessly with the existing band condition widget. For more information, visit dxlook.com.
Ofcom, the regulator in the United Kingdom, has moved ahead with phases 2 and 3 of changes announced earlier that affect amateur radio licensees. These actions follow those made in Phase 1 of February 2024, which adjusted power limits and expanded operating freedom. This month, hams with intermediate call signs have the option to replace their number 2 series call prefixes with either an M8 or M9, and can either retain or replace their existing suffix. These are voluntary changes at the moment, but in 5 years, the regulator will change all the remaining call signs. Ofcom is also limiting license holders to a single personal call sign and will be revoking all but the one chosen to be kept. Hams are also getting the option to change their call signs every 5 years. Other changes include those affecting special event stations, can be found in the online version of Ofcom.
ARRL Atlantic Division Director Bob Flamiglio, K3RF, made a television appearance on WTXF-TV, Fox 29 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania's Talking Up a Storm program, on Sunday, October 10, 2025. Flamiglio was the guest of meteorologist Drew Anderson, and the talk was all things amateur radio, including a little history, gadgets, and even how amateur radio helps when the weather turns dangerous. I made sure viewers received a better definition of amateur radio operators, said Flamiglio. We're not just sitting in the basement messing with knobs and gadgets. We are ready to help with communications when needed. Famiglio also had a chance to talk about ARRL's nationwide grassroots Pass the Bill campaign to pass the Amateur Radio Emergency Preparedness Act that was introduced in February 2025. Also joining the conversation was Lou Rowe, WX3I, Skywarn, Pennsylvania Regional Coordinator, Storm Chaser, and Meteorologist. Famiglio said a video of the show, which was also broadcast on one of Fox 29's digital on-air channels, would be available in a couple of weeks.
A club website can keep members informed of news and upcoming events, keep them interested between meetings and activities, teach them about ham radio skills and technology, or even make them laugh, remember, or set an operating goal. The sky's the limit. As part of ARRL's Year of the Club celebration in 2026, ARRL wants to see your club's website. Enter the club website contest for the chance to have your website honored in QST. Here are the rules and requirements. The club website contest is open to ARRL-affiliated clubs that maintain a club website. Submissions must include a completed club website contest submission form, which asks for information about your club and its website, as well as a 500-word statement on the purpose or goals of your website and how the features and configuration of the website fulfill the club's purpose and goals. Part of the judging process will include a comparison of your statement with the website itself. Winners will be notified in May 2026, with awards presented at Huntsville Hamfest in August 2026. Winners will be announced in a 2026 issue of QST as part of ARRL's Year of the Club celebration. The QST article may present material from the 500-word statements supplied in the winner's club website contest submission form. Please note that winners may be asked to supply high-resolution files of specific website pages. The submission deadline is Friday, January 30th, 2026 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Please note that once you send your submission form, you may update content on your website as needed per your club's normal operation, but you may not make significant changes to the site's structure or functionality until April 1st, 2026.
At its annual meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, the AMSAT Board of Directors elected Drew Glassbrenner, Kilo Oscar 4, Mike Alpha, President. Glassbrenner succeeds Robert Bankston, Kilo Echo 4, Alpha Lima, who had served as AMSAT's president since 2020 and earlier this year announced his intention to step down. Glassbrenner had previously served as AMSAT's Vice President of Operations since 2006 and as Director for many years. As an enthusiastic operator, Glassbrenner earned Satellite DXCC, worked all states, AMSAT Gridmaster, and has over 2,100 VUCC satellite grids. He is also a proud father of two young hams, Kilo Oscar 4, Uniform Yankee Echo, and Kilo Quebec 4, Sierra Juliet Mike. Additionally, Glassbrenner serves as a member of the International Amateur Radio Union Satellites Frequency Coordination Panel and advises university CubeSat teams on frequency coordination and licensing issues. The Board of Directors also elected the following officers for the next year. Executive Vice President, Paul Stotzer, November 8, Hotel Mike. Vice President, Operations, Mark Hammond, November 8, Mike Hotel. Vice President, Engineering, Jerry Buxton, November 0, Juliet Yankee. Treasurer, Steve Belter, November 9, India Papa. Secretary, Doug Tabor, November 6, Uniform Alpha. Additionally, the President appointed the following officers. Vice President, Educational Relations, Alan Johnson, Kilo Uniform 2 Yankee. Vice President, Development, Frank Karnauskas, November 1, Uniform Whiskey.
At its annual meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, the AMSAT Board of Directors unanimously voted to offer student memberships at no cost. Free student memberships are offered for individuals under the age of 25 enrolled in an educational program from primary school through a master's degree. The benefits of an AMSAT student membership include a 1-year-long digital subscription to the AMSAT Journal and discounted prices on certain items in the AMSAT store. Interested students may sign up for their no-cost membership at launch.amsat.org/membership.
The Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission will no longer require broadcast radio stations to renew their license as part of a rule it said it has adopted to help stations save money and shrink administrative burdens. The Commission said it was hoping the action would amount to a boost for terrestrial broadcasting, which, while facing challenges recently, nonetheless remains a vital source of news, information, and culture. A report on the Radio World website said that the open-ended licenses will replace those that presently have a maximum term of 7 years. The Commission will phase in the new licensing framework as the stations apply for their renewals. In a statement, the CRTC assured broadcasters that station monitoring would still be vigilant despite the switch to the open-ended licenses. Compliance reviews, which traditionally have occurred at the time of license renewal, will instead be conducted as needed.
We all know how precious copper can be in our antennas and elsewhere in our shacks. Our broadcast colleagues know it too, and have suffered in recent years from vandalism and theft involving copper. And, as we have reported in the past, it has taken them off the air. One FCC commissioner recently called publicly for tougher responses from the agency. As you know, there's a growing epidemic of attacks on communication sites, and the responses needs to include sharper federal penalty and more sophisticated preventative actions from the industry, according to the newest commissioner to join the Federal Communications Commission. Olivia Trusty, who was confirmed to the agency in June, called on telecom companies and broadcasters to fortify their sites with tamper-proof housings, cameras, and alarms, and said the government must likewise step up the penalties for the theft and vandalism. She made her remarks in a video presentation this month at the Telecom Industry Incident Management and Prosecutorial Collaboration Summit in California. The past few years have seen a number of high-profile copper thefts in the United States, disabling internet and television services and even knocking broadcast stations off the air. For some radio stations, the results was tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. Trusty noted that in some instances, the 911 emergency services was disrupted by similar attacks on telecom sites, with the United States Department of Homeland Security calling communication systems a top infrastructure sector. A bipartisan measure has been introduced in Congress to address these concerns. It is known as the Stopping the Theft and Destruction of Broadband Act of 2025 and was introduced by a Democrat and Republican lawmaker with support from the industry. We will keep an eye on this story and bring you updates as necessary.
It is time for this week's AMSAT satellite shorts from all over. And we begin this week with a story from SpaceX, who has closed a chapter in its Starship saga on October 13th. It launched what appeared to be a nearly flawless suborbital mission with its version 2 Starship Super Heavy rocket, the final flight for this iteration of the launch vehicle. This was the final Starship launch of the year and the last mission that will fly from Pad A in its current configuration. SpaceX now turns its attention to completing and testing version 3 of Starship Super Heavy, which will begin launch from Pad B. It's this iteration of the rocket that SpaceX intends to use for launching payloads to orbit and eventually flying missions to the Moon and Mars. Next comes word that the Federal Communications Commission, which issues amateur radio service licenses, issued a public notice on Tuesday, September 30th, indicating that it would suspend most operations following the government shutdown. ARRL Volunteer Examiner Coordinator Manager Maria Soma, AB1FM, said the FCC systems are currently offline and are redirecting to the public notice. This means the FCC will not be processing any amateur radio license applications during the shutdown, which includes individual, club, and exam sessions, both new and upgrade applications. However, Soma urged that volunteer examiners continue to promptly forward session results from their exams to the ARRL-VEC. ARRL-VEC will promptly resume submitting applications to the FCC for processing. And finally this week, a constellation of classified defense satellites built by SpaceX, is emitting a mysterious signal that may violate international standards. Satellites associated with the Starshield satellite network appear to be transmitting to the Earth on frequencies normally used for sending commands from Earth to satellites in space. The use of those frequencies to downlink data runs counter to standards set by the International Telecommunication Union. Starshield's unusual transmissions have the potential to interfere with other scientific and commercial satellites, warns Scott Tilley, VA7LF, an amateur satellite tracker in Canada who first spotted the signals.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There is so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. This coming week in particular will feature quite a bit of DX due to the upcoming CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. As I've said before, the week before and the week after the contest are typically rich with DX. So here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, do as several other listeners have done and drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll get you fixed up. Mark, XE1 Bravo, is returning to Revagado Island and should be QRV until October 30th. His mission is to meet the New Mexican Naval Base commander and set the conditions for an international team with remote capabilities for the future. Access to the base is severely restricted and only via a Navy battleship making supply runs from Baja, Mexico. The next trip is scheduled for an October 23rd departure from Socorro and a return on October 30th. Since the trip is 36 hours each way, this allows Mark a 5-day window of operating. Mark is a 3-time veteran of trips to Socorro, having activated XF4 in 1999, 2011, and 2018. He has permission from the Navy and 2 other regulatory agencies to visit the island and operate. He has a new license for this trip. The call sign will be released when he is QRV, but not before. This is a self-funded trip using Mark's personal equipment and some equipment purchased in the United States by N1DG Don Greenbaum. This will be a low-profile, low geographic impact operation to show the base commander that a de-expedition can be conducted without a major impact on the island's mission. Use of remote operators via the NCDXF RIB technology will also be discussed. Accordingly, do not expect a mega de-expedition at this time. Mark's intent is to make as many all-time new ones, contacts, and lower XF4's club log most wanted rank of 24, as much as one operator can do in 5 days. To this end, he will bring 2 radios, an amplifier, and 4 antennas to operate single sideband and FT8 simultaneously. There will be no automated FT8 QSOs. He is unsure of internet availability, so there will be no live streaming of his logs. QSL after the operation using club log only. Don, N1DG, will handle the QSL processing. LOTW QSOs will be uploaded as OQRS requests or processes. After postage and QSL printing costs, all excess proceeds will be donated to the Northern California DX Foundation. I think that's a wonderful gesture, Mark. Thank you. An international team of radio ops are celebrating the 50 years of Angola's independence with special call sign Delta to Alpha. The ops are from Angola, Portugal, and Spain. Delta to Alpha will be on the air until approximately October 29th. They say their operation also promotes Angola's cultural and natural resources to the world. They will be on Musola Island 24 hours a day. Independence came on November 11, 1975. The 6 Delta II Alpha stations will be 4 IC-7300s, something for satellite, and an Elecraft. Planned modes are CW, sideband, RIDI, FT8, and QO100 satellite, and then 160 through 6 meters. And immediately before going online tonight, I got an update from Echo Charlie 7 Radio, Francisco, who's on the Delta II Alpha team. Quote, "We are trying to be on all possible bands and modes as long as propagation allows. The 60-meter band, which has been authorized for the first time in Angola, has a huge amount of expectations from everyone. We have had to change the location of antennas several times due to interference and noise from the power grid. We will try to work and look toward the United States, but conditions are not currently favorable. We will try to be in the CQ Worldwide contest and compete here for the African zone, although it is very difficult due to our conditions." End quote. Team Antigua will be activating Victor 26 Bravo for the CQ Worldwide single sideband contest in the multi-multi category with a 9-person team. And you can QSL Victor 26 Bravo via LOTW or OQRS. The individual ops will be testing things out before the contest, and you can QSL them via their QRZ.com pages. Pat Alpha Alpha Zero Oscar is joining the VP2 MPN contest team from Montserrat. While not in the contest, he'll be operating with the VP2 MOO call sign. He'll be there October 22nd to the 28th, and you can QSL VP2 MMO via AA0 Oscar. Luke, F5RAV, operating as C5LT, and Louis, YT3PL, operating as C5R, are currently QRV from the Gambia until November 7th, operating CW, sideband, and digital modes on several bands. They will also participate in the CQ Worldwide DX single sideband contest as Charlie 5 Radio. QSL Charlie 5 Lima Tango direct to F5RAV and Charlie 5 Radio direct to YU5 Radio. Additionally, they are working on a humanitarian project to raise funds for new classrooms for children. The Rebel DX group continues to be QRV as Echo 6 Alpha Delta from Nui Island. This activity will be conducted by 2 individuals with a primary focus on the digital mode. Occasional operations using CW and sideband will also take place, utilizing 8 stations on FT8, 1 station on CW, and 1 station on single sideband. They will transmit up to 16 streams concurrently on each band, utilizing different frequencies within the same band. If traffic is low on the Foxhound frequency, operations will shift to the standard FT8 frequencies. QSOs will be uploaded to ClubLog, and OQRS will be available for LOTW and direct QSLs. Please note that there may be an extended waiting period for processing of direct QSLs due to logistical challenges and continual travel. Here's one I'm excited about. AB1 Foxtrot has announced that the A52AA 2025 initiative to Bhutan has made significant progress, as the Kingdom of Bhutan has officially issued both the e-visa and the amateur radio license under the same 2023 call sign of Alpha 52 Alpha Alpha. AB is scheduled to be active from November 24 to December 5th. And I know that's a little ways out, but that's one you got to mark on your calendar and you got to work. It just isn't that active very often. Once again, Jaime, Y0RUR, is headed to Gudon, Brunei to operate from the V85 radio hotel station during the CQ Worldwide DX contest October 25 and 26. He will be in the single op all band high power category, and you can QSL V85RH via LOTW. Also from Brunei, we find that special event station V84 SRU will be active to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the International Amateur Radio Union, and activity on the air from 24th of October to the 26th of November 2025. The operators will be active on the air every day on sideband, CW, and FT8. Randy, KX4QD, has been a little more active as V73HW from the Marshall Islands with recent activity on 20, 15, and 6 meters FT8. He is usually on the air over the weekends and in the mornings during the weekdays. He enjoys both sideband and FT8 and runs 1,000 watts into his log periodic antenna and, quote, some experimental verticals. QSL direct to Randall Heil, PSC 701, Box 307, APO 96555 USA. Or if you need that QSL address, you can email the dxmentor@gmail.com and I'll fix you up. Rudy, DK7PE, will embark on his 3rd Pacific DXpedition from October 25th to November 19th. His journey begins with a flight to Tokyo, then continues to Guam, followed by stops in Palau, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and potentially Kiribati T30RK. Rudy notes that affordable HF operating locations on the islands are rare, with high accommodation costs and significant radio interference, typically S9 at most sites. To manage costs, he plans to operate portable or from a car at 100 watts output, which will allow him to set up near the sea, but requires daily antenna setup and takedown, meaning his operations won't be continuous. The DXpedition will blend traditional DXing, antenna experimentation, and interactions with local amateur radio enthusiasts. Rudy aims to operate on the low bands and 60 meter CW where permitted, making all QSOs manually with his ETM 9C keyer in the style of a classic solo DXpedition. He's a heck of an operator. I've worked him several times, and I hope you get a chance to hear him and get him in the log. The youth PJ6Y DXpedition team to St. Eustatius and Saba have 4 stations on the air, with a 5th station expected to be QRV later this morning. They've had some lightning and rain, which has slowed them down a bit. Here's another situation where I just got an update about an hour ago. The young operators have surpassed 20,000 QSOs already and counting as DXpedition momentum builds. The PJ6Y team has just surpassed 20,000 QSOs, marking a major milestone in their on-air operations. The young amateur radio operators are taking full advantage of excellent propagation conditions, sharpening their skills, and connecting with stations worldwide. Operating around the clock, the team currently has 3 local and 2 remote stations active on the air. The on-island contingent of 14 operators is joined by approximately 30 young remote operators from around the globe, a truly international collaboration showcasing the next generation of DXers. Quote, "We have a bit of antenna work to complete today in advance of our participation in CQ Worldwide single sideband," shared Greg, W6IZT. "The weather has been somewhat of a challenge with frequent showers and lightning. With heavier rain forecasts from Thursday through our departure, we're accelerating our contest preparations," end quote. Despite the challenging conditions, spirits remain high. "What an amazing and awesome group of future DXpedition leaders," said Glenn, W0GJ, and Glenn would know. The team extends a huge thank you to sponsors, supporters, and off-island Elmers whose encouragement and contributions have made this adventure possible. For updates and to make donations, please visit www.pj6y2025.com. EX9A will be in next weekend's CQ Worldwide single sideband contest from Kyrgyzstan with multi-single station with 7 ops calling themselves Contest Club Kyrgyzstan, and you can QSL them through Club Log. 6 Oscar 3 Tango became QRV around 21:30 Zulu Monday, October 20th. They've been reported on using FT8 on 40, 20, 17, 15, and 10 meters. Late yesterday, Bernie, W3UR, received a message from the team, quote, "We're back on the air. Couldn't leave this adventure half done. On the air now 20 and 40 meters. Signal's a bit noisy, but the spirit's loud and clear." They were referring to the 2024 6 Oscar 3 Tango DXpedition failure to get on the air. "Everything's okay if signals are strong and there's no polar flutter," Fred adds. The 6 Oscar 3 Tango team has slightly updated their website with new operating times and conditions, and you can check that out at dxexplorer.net. Edgar, K2N, also known as Hotel Charlie 8 Mike, is now active as Hotel Delta 8 Romeo from San Cristobal Island in the Galapagos Islands until Tuesday, November 4th. During the CQ Worldwide DX single sideband contest, HD8R will be participating. QSL via OQRS M0OXO. The DX Mentor features a podcast episode this coming weekend, a new one, the Yasmi Foundation and the great contributions of Ward Silver N0AX. Check it out and let me know what you think. This guy is a real Renaissance man, and we enjoyed the heck out of this recording that podcast. If you want to follow all of the latest DX podcasts and YouTube releases, as well as DX information, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all DX activities. Contest updates. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or work all-time new ones. And 2 of the best are coming up. This one is at the end of October, the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. The contest to prepare for, as I mentioned, is the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest, October 26th and 27th. The side benefit to both this contest and the CQ Worldwide CW Contest at the end of November is that the DX that you can work before and after the contest, as I mentioned earlier. Before the contest, contesters are going to remote locations and will spend considerable time on the air testing their rigs, antennas, and propagation. After the contest, they often hang around for a few days, enjoying the location they are at and spending more time on the air. It's a great time to fill band slots and to pick up an all-time new one. Keep your eyes and ears open. If you do participate, please let me know. And look for me in the CQ Worldwide contest as AJB. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I received an email from Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, asking me about an idea I'd worked on some time ago, namely the notion that I might monitor solar flux at home using a software-defined radio. At the time, I was attempting to get some software running on my Pluto SDR and got nowhere fast. Before I continue, a Pluto SDR, or more formally an ADALM Pluto Active Learning Module by Analog Devices, is both a computer and a software-defined radio receiver and transmitter in a cute little blue box. I've talked about this device before. It's an open design, which means that both the software and hardware are documented and available straight from the manufacturer. Out of the box, it covers 325 MHz to 3.8 GHz. You can connect to a Pluto SDR using USB or via the network, wireless or Ethernet, though I will mention that neither of those last two is currently working for me, but more on that later. Encouraged by Frank's email, I set out to explore further and came across a 2019 European GNU Radio Days workshop, which discussed some of the tools that are available for the Pluto SDR, accompanied by 2 PDF documents walking you through the experience. One comment around why the Pluto SDR uses networking as one of the connectivity options spoke to me. From a usability perspective, networking makes it easier to access the Pluto SDR from a virtual machine, since most of the time that already has network connectivity, whereas USB often requires drivers. As you might recall, network connectivity is one of the many things that I'm trying to achieve with a project that I'm calling Bald Yak, since by the time we're done there's not going to be much hair left from all the yak shaving. The Bold Yak project aims to create a modular, bidirectional and distributed signal processing and control system that leverages GNU radio. As a result, I set about trying to actually walk myself through those PDF tutorials, and got stuck on the first sentence on the first page, which helpfully states, quote, "The necessary prerequisites have been installed on the local lab machine," end quote. It went on to supply a link to a page with instructions on how to acquire those very same prerequisites. 2 days later, after much trial and error, I can now report that I too have these installed, and because I cannot help myself, I made it into a Docker container and published this on my VK6 FLAB GitHub page. To put it mildly, there's a few moving parts and plenty of gotchas. As an aside, if you think that installing Docker is harder than installing these tools, I have some news for you. Trust me, by a long shot, it's not. Right now, I'm working on writing the documentation that accompanies this project, such that you can actually use it without needing to bang your head against the desk in frustration. Mind you, the documentation part of this is non-trivial. For reasons I don't yet understand, my Pluto does not want to talk to the network directly over either Wi-Fi or Ethernet, and connecting over USB through a virtual machine inside a Docker container is giving me headaches. So right now I'm connected across the network to a Raspberry Pi that's physically connected to the Pluto. As a result, I can now use the tools inside my Docker container connected to the Pluto through the Pi, and if you're curious, IIOD is the tool to make that happen. More documentation. At this point you might well ask, why bother? This is a fair question. Let me see if I can give you an answer that will satisfy. Monitoring solar flux typically occurs at 2.8 GHz, which is outside the range of RTL SDR dongles, which top out at about 1.7 GHz. For the Pluto SDR, however, it's almost perfectly within the standard frequency range. One of the tools that is introduced by the talk is an application called IIO Scope, which, as the name suggests, is an oscilloscope for IIO, or Industrial I/O Devices, of which the Pluto SDR is one. As an aside, the accelerometer in your laptop, the battery voltage, the CPU temperatures, fans, and plenty of others are all IIO devices that you can look at with various tools. So, once I finish the tutorials, I suspect that I will understand a little better how some of the various parts of the Pluto SDR hang together, and I can set it up to monitor 2.8 GHz. Of course, that's only step one. The next step is to make a Raspberry Pi record the power levels over time. Better still, record it on the Pluto SDR itself, and see if we can actually notice any change, without requiring anything fancy, like a special antenna, some massive filters, a special mount, and all the other fun and games that no doubt will reveal themselves in good time. It also means that, if I got this right, I have the beginnings of the bits needed to get the Pluto SDR to talk to GNU radio. Why? Because I can, and because Frank asked. Also, yak shaving. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Welcome to the 30th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our appreciation goes out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us permission to use his website in the generation of these segments. Now sit back and relax and enjoy this, the next chapter of Ham Radio History. Transcons at record speed. The League ran another round of transcontinental relays over several nights in January 1921, setting new records for coast-to-coast round-trip message relaying. Maxim Station W1AW participated in several of them, even unplanned ones, operating all night with several guests sharing the duties of operators. On the first night, 14 January, the Hartford Courant and Los Angeles Times editors exchanged greetings, as did the editors at the San Francisco Examiner and Boston American. The second night, the mayors of Hartford and Los Angeles exchanged messages, along with the editors at the Boston Globe and San Francisco Chronicle, and those at the Ellendale, North Dakota Leader and the New Orleans Item. And on the third night, the Elks at the two Portlands, Oregon and Maine, exchanged messages from their respective mayors in just an hour and 21 minutes. Though not as good as on previous nights, conditions on the final night seemed good enough for an all-out record speed attempt, with light strays in the east and an intense rainstorm in the west. Anticipation again ran high, and Warner pondered the compelling draw of such on-air collaborations, writing, "There is really something very theatric in the lineup for the big Transcon test. We have been interested in radio for a good many years, and we have seen a good deal of it from the amateur side, but the wonder of it never palls. There is a genuine fascination for us on any old night when we marvel at our ability to sit in a half-darkened room before a little collection of instruments, with the audions dimly glowing, and hear the messages from our friends come buzzing in through the night. How much greater the thrill, then, on this eventful night as the entire country got set for the endeavor to hang up a new speed record." The special message was postponed until 3 a.m. to allow conditions to improve and perhaps quiet down a bit. Stations then fell silent in response to QRX, please, OM, transcons, leaving the airwaves to only those directly participating in the tests. The great organizations of the ARRL was clearing decks for action, wrote Warner. From 3 o'clock until 4:45, not a signal was audible at 1AW when 9ZN was silent, yet hundreds upon hundreds of stations were QRX with eager ears, and the very air was tense. 5 round-trip messages were planned to be sent by Maxim and Schnell at 1AW to Pacific Division Director A.E. Bessie at 6ZK in Sunnyvale. The first one traveled out and back in 23 minutes, triggering many intermediate relays to be clipped off at a speed around 30 words per minute. The second one never reached 6ZK, due in part to poor conditions, but also because he simply was not expecting a second message, having received incomplete instructions. But 29-year-old Californian Vernice M. Bitts at 6JD, who had been one of the intermediate relayers, intercepted it and sent a reply himself that was received just minutes later by 1AW. A stickler for detail, Maxim nevertheless considered this a failure since the reply did not come from the addressee. No matter. On the third try, 1AW changed his target to try a round trip to 6JD, who immediately dashed off a reply right out of his head. This third message set the new round-trip speed record of 6.5 minutes. Hartford to Los Angeles and back again via 4 relay stations each way. The bugs in Hartford were jubilant. 1AW sent a fourth message simply asking, 6JD, how does Caliph regard prohibition? Maxim. The 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, banning the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages, had been ratified on January 16, 1919, and took effect on January 16, 1920, 1 year before this test. 13.5 minutes later, the reply arrived. Mr. Maxim, Caliph is supposed to be dry, but it is very wet here now. It has been raining all day. VM Bits. The test ended with a QST message reporting the new records and thanking all involved. Success that night was due every bit as much to cooperation by everyone on the sidelines in clearing the air as it was to the skill and persistence of the direct participants. The ARRL would now make the Transcons a yearly event. The New York Times reported the new record in a short article, noting a new civilian wireless record, crediting Maxim and the ARRL. Included in this material are quotes from the following. K.B. Warner, The Story of the Transcons, QST, March 1921, page 5. Maxim sets new radio record for civilians, The New York Times, January 19, 1921. With thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us permission to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, in the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The East Coast Amateur Radio Service Net has begun the process of collecting nominations for its election of officers to be held in the month of December. ECARS is a certified nonprofit organization which serves the amateur radio community daily from 0730 to 1330 Eastern Time on 7.255 megahertz for the purpose of establishing schedules, gathering signal reports, weather information, and other critical information, and since its inception in the 1960s, has given special priority to mobile and QRP stations. ECAR's membership is not necessary to check in, and membership dues are used mainly to fund various grants and worthy scholarships after paying down the organization's very modest expenses. Currently, the election committee is collecting nominations for all 3 ECARS officer positions, president, vice president, and secretary-treasurer, along with 2-year director slots, which are open for 2026. Members who wish to run for office or who would like to nominate another member whom they know is willing to serve should contact a member of the election committee. This year's election committee consists of Tim, K3JTA, who is the committee chair, Jim, KE8LDB, Jerry, N2ZGN, and Andy, KC3GHK. Aside from this year's election of officers, ECARS is always looking for those who can serve as net control operators. Qualifications necessary to run for office or to serve as net control op are the same. One must be a licensed general class operator or above and be a member in good standing. More information about the East Coast Amateur Radio Service is available at their website, ecars7255.com.
Amazon's Project Kuiper satellites finally made it into space aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket after more than a week of weather-related delays. The rocket departed Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station on Monday, October 13th at 9:58 p.m. Eastern Time. The 24 broadband internet satellites are part of a planned constellation considered to be a rival service to Starlink, which already has more than 90 missions this year to bring its satellites into space. Monday's Kuiper project launch brings that constellation's total of 153 such satellites in space. Ultimately, 3,236 are expected to be deployed at 3 altitudes of low Earth orbit: 590 kilometers, 610 kilometers, and 630 kilometers, to compete with Starlink's constellation of nearly the same size. Meanwhile, China has been building its own counterpart projects, which translates into English as the National Network and the Thousand Sails. Both of these planned networks are expected to contain about 13,000 satellites apiece.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT has taken an unprecedented step in furthering our educational outreach efforts. During the AMSAT Board of Directors meeting, AMSAT President Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, suggested that student memberships should be free. I made a motion to that effect, and it was unanimously approved by the board. Any student can apply for a free membership at launch.amsat.org/membership. The only stipulation is that they must be enrolled in an educational program from primary school through a master's degree program and be under the age of 25. In the few days since announcement, there have been 18 students registered. These students are our future, and to allow them the benefits of membership will help them through their chosen career development. AMSAT is working to have 5 each of our SDRB boards, linear transponder modules, or LTMs, and PACSAT boards on the shelf ready to meet any short notice launch possibilities or school requests by the end of 2026. An upgrade to the software on CubeSat Sim will allow it to transmit in FunCube mode, as well as use it for a crossband repeater, on very low power, of course. These 2 new features will make learning more fun in the classroom. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the solar weather conditions and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity reached moderate levels this past week, but has now returned to, and remains at, lower levels. Region 4248 produced an M1.1 flare on October 20th, which was the largest event of the period. Region 4261 was numbered this period as it rotated into better viewing conditions. Region 4262 was numbered this period as well, splitting it from Region 4257. Additionally, new spots were noted, but went unnumbered due to a lack of flaring in time of emergence. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. Solar activity is expected to remain low, with a chance for isolated M-class minor to moderate flares, through October 23. Additional notable activity included a Type 2 radio sweep with an estimated speed of 2,474 km per second, and a Type 4 radio sweep that began on October 21. Significant field line movement, appearing to originate from beyond the northwestern limb, was observed in GOES-SUVI imagery beginning on October 21. The subsequent coronal mass ejection was then first seen on LASCO C2 coronagraph imagery on October 21. This event has been analyzed as a far-sighted asymmetric halo. Solar wind parameters were mildly enhanced this period due to negative polarity coronal hole high-speed stream influences. Phi was predominantly positive while undertaking brief excursions into the positive solar sector. Solar activity is expected to be at moderate levels from October 31 to November 15, due to the return of Region 4246. Low levels are expected to prevail to October 30, and then on November 14 and 15. Geomagnetic field activity is expected to reach minor to moderate storm levels on October 28 through the 30th. Although it may not seem so at first glance, solar activity is still at the peak of its 25th cycle. Although the number of sunspot groups fell to 6 in mid-October, a week later it had risen to 10. Few eruptions were observed on the solar disk, or the side of the sun facing Earth, including only a few that could be classified as moderately strong based on the intensity of X-ray emissions. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, October 24th, the weekly RIDI test, that's digital. Also on the 24th, the NCCC Sprint CW. October 25th through the 26th, the CQ Worldwide DX contest, single sideband, that's phone. October 25th, the 902 MHz and up fall sprint, CW phone and digital. And on October 27th, the RSGB FT4 contest, digital. And on October 29th, the UKE ICC 80-meter contest, that is CW. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on October 23rd through the 26th. It's HamCon Colorado 2025, hosting the ARRL Rocky Mountain Division Convention. That's in Grand Junction, Colorado. November 1st, the Stone Mountain Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL Georgia State Convention in Lawrenceville, Georgia. November 15th, it's the Super Situation ARC Superfest and Electronics Expo, hosting the ARRL Arizona State Convention. That's in Mesa, Arizona. And on December 12th through the 13th, the Tampa Bay Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL West Central Florida Section Convention. That's in Plant City, Florida. And remember to search the ARRL Ham Fest and Convention database to find more events in your area. Many special events are planned to celebrate 2025 Veterans Day on November 11th from 1500 Zulu to 2000 Zulu. KA4TOL, the Horry Post 111 of the American Legion Amateur Radio Club of Conway, South Carolina, will be on the air using 14.255, 7.264, 14.275, and 7.185 megahertz. A certificate will be available by email. QSL cards are accepted, and the sender will receive a QSL card in return. On November 11th and November 12th, from 0400 to 0400, WJ4DD, the Orlick Amateur Radio Society in Jacksonville, Florida, will celebrate Navy Days and Veterans Day using 7.225 and 14.250 megahertz. That celebration will include the birthdays of the Naval Air Stations, NAS, at Jacksonville, Naval Air Station Mayport, Master Jet Base NAS Seacoast Field, and the birthday of the United States Marines. A certificate will be available there. The New River Valley Amateur Radio Club in Christiansburg, Virginia will celebrate Veterans Day from the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia, with a special event station, W2B, on 14.275 megahertz. For additional information, visit their website, www.n4nrv.org. And the Central Ohio Radio Club, Cork, in Columbus, Ohio, will air its fourth annual Veterans Day check-in net on the club's 146.76 repeater. All amateur radio operators are invited to participate and share their stories of family and military service or Veterans Day tributes.
One of the greatest challenges of amateur radio ought to be getting a rare DX, logging an all-time new one, or mastering a new skill or new operating mode. It should not be the act of trying to get on the air itself. To ensure that radio amateurs with disabilities have the same chance at all other challenges and adventures, the Program for Disabled Radio Amateurs in International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 is encouraging a celebration on and off the air to reflect ham radio's welcoming spirit. This event will take place on December 3rd, which the United Nations has declared to be International Day of Persons with Disabilities. In an announcement about the program, its coordinator, Riri Azrak, OD5RI, encourages ham radio societies to plan awareness events, nets, or special events using a special call sign incorporating the letters PDRA. Hams are also being urged to identify and support radio operators with disabilities or persons with disabilities who are seeking their license. He wrote, "Together, we can demonstrate that amateur radio truly belongs to everyone, regardless of physical or sensory ability."
In the club spotlight this week, ARRO would like to know just how your club greets and deals with new members and especially new hams. Please take a few minutes to fill out the survey at the club spotlight on new members at arrl.org. Your answers may be featured in future publications. And the ARRL Kentucky section has a new manager, Robert Subretti, K6CZ has been appointed as section manager for the Kentucky section as of October 17th, 2025. He is active in contesting and digital modes. And Sobretti assumes the role after the former section manager Alan Morgan, KY10, became a silent key recently. Morgan had served as section manager in Kentucky from April 2015 to 2017 and again this year.
Using 11 years of magnetic field measurements from the European Space Agency's Swarm satellite constellation, scientists have discovered that the weak region in Earth's magnetic field over the South Atlantic, known as the South Atlantic Anomaly, has expanded by an area nearly half the size of continental Europe since 2014. Earth's magnetic field is vital to life on our planet. It is a complex and dynamic force that protects us from cosmic radiation and charged particles from the sun. It is largely generated by a global ocean of molten, swirling liquid iron that makes up the outer core, around 3,000 kilometers beneath our feet. Acting like a spinning conductor in a bicycle dynamo, it creates electrical currents, which in turn generate our continuously changing electromagnetic field. But in reality, the processes that generate that field are far more complex. Swarm, an Earth Explorer mission developed under the European Space Agency's Earth Observation Future EO program, comprises a constellation of 3 identical satellites that precisely measure the magnetic signals that stem from Earth's core, mantle, crust, and the oceans, as well as from the ionosphere and magnetosphere. Thanks to this exceptional mission, scientists are gaining more insight into the different sources of magnetism to help understand how and why the magnetic field is weakening in some places and strengthening in others. Today, the South Atlantic Anomaly is of particular interest for space safety, as satellites passing over the region are faced with higher doses of incoming radiation. This can lead to malfunctions or damage to critical hardware and even blackouts. The South Atlantic Anomaly is not just a single block, says lead author Chris Finlay, professor of geomagnetism at the Technical University of Denmark. It's changing differently towards Africa than it is near South America. There's something special happening in this region that is causing the field to weaken in a more intense way.
The Radio Society of Great Britain is excitedly announcing the launch of the RSGB mobile app. This fantastic members' benefit allows them to enjoy RADCOM, RADCOM Basics, and RADCOM Plus wherever they are. Complementing the RSGB's existing web app, with the new mobile app, users can save editions to read offline, bookmark articles to enjoy later, and have seamless access to extra digital content. With easy-to-use navigation, the app is the one-stop shop for RSGB publications. For our RSGB members tuned today, you can download it via the Apple app and Google Play stores, or go to rsgb.org for links.
The Halloween tradition known as the Pumpkin Patrol may not be as much fun as trick-or-treating, but in a number of northern New York State counties, it's become a lifesaver. Halloween can be a time for mischief, and that mischief can turn deadly, as it almost did in 1976 when an object was thrown from a bridge over the New York State Thruway and smashed into the windshield of a truck below. The shattered glass injured the driver, who was talking on his CB radio at the time, and another CB radio operator heard that the trucker was in distress, decided immediately that she and her 2 friends would bring their radios to that overpass and to others in the country and would stand watch the next evening. New York State Police now conduct the Pumpkin Patrol in various counties traversed by the Thruway, and for more than 4 decades, ham radio operators have been there too. This year, the teams of volunteer radio operators will be out on the nights of October 30 and 31, keeping in constant touch with a net control station that can call for emergency response if necessary.
The amateur radio on the International Space Station program has reason to celebrate. With the help and hard work of technicians, engineers, and other team members, ARIS marked the first contact in 7 years that made use of ham TV, a QSO between the first Radford Semele Scout Group in the UK and NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, Kilo Juliet 5, Hotel Kilo Papa, on October 18th. The digital amateur TV transmitter, based in the Columbus module, permits the audience to view live video downlinks during their contacts with the astronauts. As he called up to the space station to say the team and the European ham TV ground stations were ready, Ciaran Morgan, Mike Zero X-Ray Tango Delta, Eris Operations Lead for the UK, dedicated the call to Gaston Birtles, Oscar November 4, Whiskey Foxtrot. Gaston was at the helm of the ham TV technical team until he became a silent key in December 2024. He had been a key player in getting the L and S band antennas installed on the Columbus module. Ham TV operated until 2018 when its failure brought it back to Earth so repairs could be made. The unit was returned to the ISS in 2024. This past July, it resumed its transmissions, and members of the British Amateur TV Club, who were standing by for those first signals, happily reported good copy. To see the ham TV contact between the ISS and the Scouts, visit the YouTube channel of Sierra Papa 5 Lima Oscar Tango.
The United States Air Force Military Auxiliary Radio System will hold its 77th annual special event from 0001 UTC November 8th through 2359 UTC November 11th, 2025. Stations Whiskey 1 Alpha, Whiskey 1 Echo, Whiskey 1 Charlie, and Whiskey 1 Whiskey will be on the air from Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, in the general and technician portions of 80 through 10 meters, excluding 60 meters, using voice, CW, and digital FT8. All amateur radio operators are invited to participate in the event. There will not be any QSL cards issued, but a downloadable certificate will be available sometime in mid-December. Visit Air Force Military Auxiliary Radio System.
Hams and non-hams around the world alike got to know Charlie Harpole after the earthquake and tsunami that ravaged Thailand and other regions in Southeast Asia in December 2004. Charlie, whose numerous call signs included Kilo 4 Victor Union Delta, Hotel Sierra 0, Zulu Charlie Whiskey, and Victor Union 3, Charlie Hotel Echo, became a line of communication for major broadcast networks and print media as the tragedy and rescue efforts unfolded. Charlie was already well known as a film and communications scholar and professor in the United States. An active de-expeditioner and ham radio advocate, he was reported by the Daily DX as having become a silent key. His contributions over the years included testing out the new 5 MHz amateur band, followed by a successful completion of the first two-way transatlantic contact on that band via ham radio on July 4, 2003. An article in the student newspaper of the University of Central Florida, where Charlie had been a professor, recognized the vital role he played during the 1996 Liberian Civil War, contacting a missionary confined in a compound amid the fighting and relaying information he was requested to pass along by the UN and the U.S. State Department. The world heard more from Charlie in December 2004. He had been filming and providing support to the Victor Union 4 de-expedition on Andaman Island when the tsunami disaster swept over South Asia. As de-expeditioners switched to handling health, welfare, and emergency communication messages, Charlie returned to Thailand, where he and his wife were living, to provide radio support for recovery efforts after the loss of conventional communication. He also provided real-time information to many of the world's media organizations, including MSNBC and CNN. Charlie was 80 years old.
A military spacecraft launched 56 years ago was moved from its orbit, and nobody is quite sure who did it or why. In 1969, the United Kingdom launched Skynet 1A, a military communication satellite placed in orbit above the east coast of Africa in order to relay information to British armed forces. It stopped working due to hardware issues around 18 months after it started operating, and the spacecraft was left to the laws of physics to orbit the Earth. It is now the oldest UK spacecraft still in space. It's a good idea to check on defunct satellites to make sure the space debris is not on course to collide with any working satellites or populated areas of the Earth below. In the 1970s, when the satellite was closely tracked, it was in a geostationary arc at a longitude of around 40 degrees east, where it remained when it was decommissioned. Such orbits are subject to gravitational perturbations by the Sun, Earth, and Moon. If Skynet 1A had failed at its operational location of around 40 east, we would now expect it to be oscillating by plus or minus 35 degrees either side of 75 east, satellite system engineer Dr. Stuart Eves explains in a blog post for the Global Network on Sustainability in Space. Except it isn't. According to the UK registry, Skynet 1A is currently sitting very close to the bottom of the other well at 105 west, oscillating by just a couple of degrees. The spacecraft is not where it's supposed to be, according to what we know about orbits, now some 36,000 kilometers above the Americas. At some point in the intervening years, the satellite has likely been moved, but nobody appears to know when, who, or why. Tracking of the satellite has been patchy, particularly in the mid-1970s, when the maneuver appears to have taken place, and any records of what happened appear to have been lost. The satellite, though the UK's first, was built and partially operated by the USA, with both countries sending commands to it. A Skynet team from Oakhanger would go to the United States Air Force facility in Sunnyvale, colloquially known as the Blue Cube, and operate Skynet during Oakout. Rachel Hill, a PhD student from University College London searching the National Archives for clues, told the BBC. This was when control was temporarily transferred to the U.S., while Oakhanger was down for essential maintenance. Perhaps the move could have happened then. While an interesting mystery as to who fired it and why, it could become more pressing in the future. In its current orbit, the satellite could pose problems for other nearby satellites in geostationary orbit. Should it collide with another, the question of who issued the order to fire the satellite's thrusters could decide which country is held liable for the ensuing damage.
In various parts of the world, emergency communicators continue to promote the use of the amateur radio service as well as other modes and methods of the next generation. In India, ham radio operators are focusing on DMR, digital mobile radio, as an alternative to analog VHF, UHF, and HF. 50 young hams were recently given training in DMR programming and operating by the Indian Academy of Communications and Disaster Management and the West Bengal Radio Club, led by Jayantara VU2 TFR and Sumaya VU3 FWK. According to the club's secretary, Ambarish Nijwa, VU2 FJA, this was the first hands-on training in DMR for radio operators. They'll be using DMR in the vast remote Delta region known as the Sundarbans. Deepak Chobarkorty, VU2 TLW, the Academy's vice principal, told the group afterwards that DMR's potential in such remote areas has prompted the Academy to plan yet another workshop focusing specifically on those challenged regions. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, members of the Ham Radio Emergency Communications Group, DX1HAM, devoted part of the 68th Annual Jamboree on the Air of scouting activities on October 18 to teach Boy Scouts of the Philippines the basics of operating two-way radio. The hams were preparing for the next generation to be familiar with the kind of radios used by licensed emergency communicators when severe storms imperil public safety in their western Pacific island archipelago.
John Dilks, K2TQN, so loved the old rigs, the crystal sets, the spark transmitters, and the keys that he assembled a collection of them, ham radio artifacts from amateur radio's earliest days, and called it the John Dilks Old Radio Museum. History was so much his passion and expertise that at one point he was asked to consult and provide radios for the 2013 film Paranoia, featuring Harrison Ford, when it was shooting outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. John, who was licensed in 1956 as KN2TQN, became a silent key on October 12th. Readers of QST magazine remember his monthly column, Old Radio, which ran in the ARRL publication from 2000 to 2014. Members of the Antique Wireless Association recall him, too, as a respected member. According to his online obituary, his love of history extended beyond the evolution of amateur radio. He often gave presentations that touched on great moments in history, including radio's role in the 1923 expedition to the North Pole and its role as well aboard the ill-fated Titanic luxury liner. In his volunteer work with the World Peace Camp in 1989, he devoted time to helping children earn their amateur radio licenses. John was 84.
Produced by amateurs for amateurs and originating from Albany, New York, you're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Approximately 35 AMSAT members gathered at Holiday Inn, Phoenix Airport North on Friday and Saturday, October 17th and 18th, for the 43rd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and Annual General Meeting. They were joined by more than 50 guests, at any one time tuning into the live stream online. Presentations from the AMSAT engineering teams updated participants on propulsion systems that may be used in the upcoming Gulf or Greater Orbit Larger Footprint series of satellites, mechanical design of the Fox Plus series of satellites, command and control, power management, and telemetry systems under development. Presentations from the AMSAT Educational Relations team focused on the CubeSat sim and its use in the classroom at various grade levels. Additional presentations were made by AMSAT's partner organization, ARISS, Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, tracking software authors, and the AMSAT Youth Initiative. The symposium culminated with the banquet on Saturday evening with a keynote delivery by Liam Cheney, PMP. Liam is an aerospace consultant and founder of Footstep Aerospace by AG3 LLC.
And finally this week, we look at the question, is low Earth orbit getting too crowded? Hundreds of satellites may soon be flying in orbital regions that are already too packed to allow safe and long-term operations, a new study suggests. The study found that, while in 2019 only 0.2% of satellites in Earth orbit were forced to perform more than 10 collision avoidance maneuvers per month, that percentage has risen sevenfold by 2025 to 1.4%. That number might still seem low, but it means that some 340 satellites spend a lot of time dodging debris and other spacecraft. Moreover, the satellite population is set to keep growing. While in 2019, about 13,700 objects, including space junk, zoomed around the planet in low Earth orbit at altitudes below 2,000 kilometers. That number has since risen to 24,185 objects in 2025, an increase of 76%, according to this study. By the end of this decade, some 70,000 satellites may reside in low Earth orbit, according to the industry growth predictions, representing a more than five-fold increase compared to the 2019 situation. The study, conducted by William E. Parker, Maya Harris, Giovanni Lavazzi, and Richard Linares of the Department of Aeronautics and Astronomics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was published September 26th in the journal Acta Astronautica. The research was sponsored by the Department of the Air Force Artificial Intelligence Accelerator. The authors selected 10 collision avoidance maneuvers per month as a threshold at which satellite operations may become too complicated to be beneficial. Different operators chose a different threshold to perform collision avoidance maneuvers. Every time two objects came within less than 200 meters of each other, the researchers noted the event as requiring a collision avoidance maneuver. NASA spacecraft mostly maneuver when the collision risk is greater than 1 in 10,000. SpaceX, the world's biggest satellite operator, with its Starlink broadband mega constellation, is more cautious, using its autonomous space dodging system to avoid an object posing a risk greater than 1 in 3.3 million. Frequent maneuvers present a disruption to operation that some satellite handlers are better able to absorb than others.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on the internet, on low-power FM stations, and on great repeater systems like the WB3GXW repeater on 147.225 megahertz in Silver Springs, Maryland, serving all of Silver Springs and also covering the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. WB3GXW can also be found on Echolink Conference Server node 6154. If you are a This Week in Amateur Radio affiliate and you would like us to give a free on-air announcement of your station's carriage of the program, please send us an email with the station location, call sign, coverage area, and day and time you air This Week in Amateur Radio, plus any other information you would like us to impart. You can send to the following email, w2xbs77@gmail.com. That address once again is w2xbs77@gmail.com. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.